Tonight, one final time. Well, we learned today of the passing of longtime editorial cartoonist Hy Rosen. For those of you who do not know, he spent 44 years at the Albany Times-Union, producing more than 10,000 insightful and very thought-provoking cartoons, sometimes even funny. Many of them were aimed at the people who were walking the halls of the capitals here in Albany and to the south in Washington, D.C. My next guest was a colleague of Rosen's, and he penned the obituary for his friend in today's paper. He is Paul Grondahl. He's actually also a former colleague of mine.
Hi, Liz.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So this is, first of all, the obituary was very touching, I thought. But a lot of things I didn't know about Hy Rosen, and I never had the pleasure of meeting him. He came up from nothing, really.
Yeah, he did. He really grew up poor in the south end of Albany. His father was a ragman, junk man who had a horse and wagon and collected trash and rags from people in the city of Albany. That
spoke to his work, didn't it? Don't you think? Like, informed his work? Because when you looked at his cartoons, it was clear that he was often on the side of the little guy.
He was. He really stood up against the powerful for the powerless. He really kind of had a common man's voice, and he always came from that street perspective. He was a street kid.
Yeah. I want to take a look at some of these. One of them is, I think it's the first one we've got. I think it has to do with Mario Cuomo. There it is. Yep. This is, first of all, indicative of Hy Rosen's style, and also is a moment where we like to refer to it as Hamlet on the Hudson for Mario Cuomo. It's a three-panel, and it's really a work of art. Yeah,
he was a really classically trained artist, Chicago Art Institute, Artists League in New York City, and he could draw representationally portraits as well as anyone. And he had that skill, but he also kind of liked to dig the knife into, especially politicians. Cuomo and he were friends personally, but he really laid it into Cuomo. He loved to exaggerate those paunches under his eyes and his facial characteristics. I mean, I like to lampoon and caricature people, you know, physically.
Yeah, this was actually, in case some people don't remember, this was because we thought at one point that Mario Cuomo might run for president. He had given the Shining City on a Hill speech at the National Convention and even had a plane waiting on the tarmac, right, and just never pulled the trigger for many reasons that are speculated even today, actually.
Yeah, something of a myth of Albany, but he was ready to go, and he sort of pulled back at the last minute. And people who were covering him for our paper and others at the Capitol, this had been going on for weeks and months, and he sort of kept everybody waiting.
This other one I want to see is, this is about someone actually you've written about, Mayor Corning, of course, and then Rocky would be the governor. This has to do with the Empire State Plaza. And it's a little bit hard to see there, but it has to do with the financing of this thing that really was, I think a lot of people consider, it's, you love it or you hate it, but it is the skyline of Albany. It makes it a signature skyline. Do you have any feeling about how Hy felt about it?
Yeah, I mean, Hy grew up in a neighborhood that was partially taken by the 98-acre complex. It really tore out the center of Albany. Historic row houses and churches and schools. Some of them were run down, but they were historic. And he knew that neighborhood and loved that neighborhood. And Corning really fought it and held out against Rockefeller as long as he could, and he eventually came up with the financing scheme that allowed the construction of it. There's a great line that Corning liked to use, I quote it in my book, when he sort of floated the idea of how they would finance this, because Rockefeller couldn't get it through. You know, downstate legislators weren't going to go for anything, a $2 billion complex in Albany.
Right.
And Rast just said, he rose to my idea like a trout to a fly. He was a fly fisherman, and he thought he kind of got the better deal in the horse trading there against Rockefeller. And I think Hy was really on Corning's side on that one.
Yeah, you know, actually, this is a total aside, but I have to bring it up. Your book, it's actually Albany Enigma. That's about Mayor Corning. I think I read somewhere recently that Shelley Silver was reading it.
In the New York Times, this thing where what do you do on your Sundays?
Right.
A lot of people emailed. He said, do you see what he said he's reading a biography of Bill Clinton and one on Mayor Corning. And it has to be my book. I did the only Mayor Corning book, so it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, it just does go to show that Albany really is, as much as downstate legislators like to sort of denigrate it, it is an important place. It is the capital of New York.
It really is. I mean, the stepping stone for several presidencies.
Oh, yeah. And now, okay, here we have another one that I think even might be indicative of some things that are going on. This is the budget baby, the big, ugly, and late budget baby. Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is, I think Mario Cuomo, and then Mel Miller and Marino, right, the Senate Majority Leader who preceded Joe Bruno.
Right.
This is more of a caricature kind of a thing. The first two that we saw, I thought, were less. I mean, you see some cartoonists now. It's actually dying art, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. At his time, he actually was a founder of the American Association of Editorial Cartoonists. At one point, they had a few hundred people, members, regularly producing for daily newspapers. Last I checked, they're down to less than 50. So there are fewer and fewer newspapers that employ a full-time editorial cartoonist. But you've been here in Albany quite a while. I've been here quite a while. This doesn't change. I mean, big, ugly baby budget and 3 men in a room fighting over it. Does it sound familiar?
It does.
I mean, Hi was drawing cartoons from 1945 until 1999, and even today, 2011. I think it's the same dynamic.
Yeah, there was another one actually that was up today. It's just that had to do with the leaderless legislature. I think I blogged on it earlier in the day, and I used that one to illustrate the blog. But it's a little bit scary about how cyclical
Right.
and how some things never change in Albany.
Yep.
I think we've got one more in here, and I don't think that this is not actually about politics, but it is really poignant, and it's actually quite pertinent because we just did see the anniversary of this event. It goes to show exactly how unusual a medium this is, really.
Yeah, this was the terrible Challenger explosion and 7 lives lost. And I remember in the newsroom that day, and Hi came in later. He wasn't in yet, but in the morning we watched it in the conference room, and we saw that explosion. And we froze for a minute, and we were, you know, as any human person would be, we were moved, we were in tears, and then it was go to work. And I started making calls, and other people started working. Hi came in later that day and did the cartoon. I mean, amazingly, his production for 44 years, every day you have to come up with an idea and execute it. The guy lived by daily deadlines, and it never ruffled him. He was a really kind of cool, classy, funny guy. Always the best dresser in the newsroom, had a real artistic sensibility, funny stories too. He could tell a good off-color joke with the best of the reporters, and you were in that environment. You know, it was kind of a boys' club.
Still am,
right?
a little bit.
It
is a boys' club.
Yeah.
Politics also is a boys' club. It is, in terms of his personality and how much of that came through in his cartoons, do you think that you can see the man in these black and white pieces of art?
I think you can. I mean, he did stand up for common people. He really came down hard on corrupt politicians. He was really moved when there was something, you know, heartbreaking or sorrowful or tragic in the world. It came through in his cartoons and illustrations. They were often stark and very sad. You really felt the emotion. And he was lived to 88. Had a good life, came up from nothing, and built a career. And he showed me, I went to see him a couple weeks before he passed away, and he brought out some great old pictures, and he's still fairly lucid, with LBJ, with Nixon.
Wow.
Funny stories of political figures, because he was on the national scene somewhat too. In those days, the Albany Cartoonist was a pretty big deal. It was syndicated by Hearst, and so he brushed shoulders with some powerful figures. In his artist studio upstairs in his house, he's got a little glass case, and there's 2 cigarettes. And they were 2 cigarettes that Golda Meir had smoked, and he snatched them from the ashtray and put them in a little thing. He's got great memorabilia from politicians.
I have memorabilia, but I do not have any ashtray. I do not have any half-smoked cigarettes. Perhaps I have to get right on that. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank you. Also want to mention that Hi Rosen has a book. It's called From Rocky to Pataki, and you can see it there on the screen. And I think it's pretty readily available. Of course, you can Google it. But I want to thank you, Paul Grondahl, for coming in. It's been fun. Dude.